He was a titan of industry, a man who could move markets with a single phone call, holding a $15,000 international first-class ticket in his hand. But to the gate agent and the stone-faced security officer, he was just a black man who in their eyes simply didn't belong. They were about to make the biggest mistake of their careers, trying to humiliate a man they couldn't possibly comprehend. What they didn't know was that his real ride was waiting for him on a different tarmac. A ride that would not only prove them wrong, but would ultimately hold the key to their own fate in a twist they never saw coming. This is the story of Aidan Michael. The air inside the Gulf Stream G700 was different. It wasn't just the recycled, faintly metallic taste of a commercial airliner. It was crisp, cool, and carried the scent of Italian leather and freshly brewed Kenyan coffee. From 45,000 feet, the Swiss Alps below looked like a crumpled piece of white paper, a dramatic but distant landscape. Aidan Michael stared down at them, not with the awe of a tourist, but with the quiet satisfaction of a conqueror. He wasn't a conqueror of mountains, but of markets. His company Etherlogics had just finalized a paradigm-shifting deal with a Swiss consortium of logistics and shipping magnates in Geneva. They had been skeptical at first. This young black American, barely 40, striding into their centuries-old boardrooms and speaking of AI-driven, predictive logistics with a calm, unshakable certainty. They had tested him, prodded him, looked for any weakness in his models or his nerve. They found none. The deal worth a cool $2 billion was signed just 3 hours ago. Aidan wasn't celebrating with champagne, though a bottle of Krug 1998 sat chilling in the galley. Instead, he sipped his coffee and reviewed the flight plan on the tablet integrated into the armrest. His pilot, a sharp ex-Air Force aviator named Leo, had filed their plan to fly back to their home base in Teterboro, New Jersey. It was a straight-shot 9 hours in the most advanced private jet money could buy. He checked his watch. Belhoho, 15 p.m. Geneva time. His commercial flight, transatlantic air flight 88 to JFK, was scheduled to depart at 9:30 p.m. The question was obvious. Why? Why would a man who owned a state-of-the-art $50 million private jet, currently sitting on the tarmac at Geneva's private terminal, be booked to fly commercial first class? The answer was simple, yet complex. It was for his father. David Michael was a man carved from a different era. A professor of history, he believed in the tangible world, in the value of shared human experience. He respected Aidan's success, but was wary of the gilded cage it was building around him. "You fly in these metal tubes, sealed off from the world, Aidan," he'd said during their last conversation. "You never see the crowds, you never feel the pulse. You're losing the texture of life." So, as a quiet promise to his father, Aidan had started a ritual. On the return leg of every major international deal, he would fly commercial. He'd put Leo and his G700 in the air, sending them home ahead of him, and he would take the long way. He would stand in lines, listen to the cacophony of the airport, and sit among strangers just to feel that pulse his father spoke of. It was a grounding exercise, a personal penance for a life that had become increasingly rarefied. "Mr. Michael." Leo's voice came through the cabin's intercom, smooth and professional. "We're beginning our initial descent into Geneva. We'll be on the ground in about 20 minutes. The car will be waiting to take you over to the main terminal." "Thanks, Leo," Aidan replied, his voice a low baritone. "Have a safe flight back. See you in Teterboro tomorrow." "You too, sir. Enjoy the texture." Leo added a hint of humor in his voice. He was one of the few who understood the ritual. Aidan smiled faintly. As the G700 banked gracefully, the setting sun glinted off its polished winglet. He gathered his briefcase, a well-worn leather satchel that had been his father's and his coat. He was dressed in a tailored Tom Ford suit, dark charcoal, with a simple white shirt, no tie. It was his uniform designed to project quiet authority without screaming for attention. On his wrist was a Patek Philippe Calatrava, a gift to himself after Etherlogix's IPO. It was a watch of subtle elegance, its value known only to those who knew what to look for. The jet touched down with a gentle whisper of rubber on asphalt. Within minutes, it had taxied to the exclusive FBO, the fixed base operator terminal, a world away from the chaos of the main airport. Here there were no lines, no shouting, just serene lounges and discreet staff. A black Mercedes S-Class was waiting on the tarmac. As Aiden disembarked, Leo gave him a crisp nod from the cockpit. The drive from the private to the commercial terminal took less than 10 minutes, but it felt like crossing a dimensional barrier. The calm evaporated, replaced by a frantic energy. The air thickened with a cocktail of anxiety, perfume, and fast food. Digital screens flashed with delays and gate changes. It was the world his father wanted him to remember. He found the transatlantic air check-in counter for first class and priority members. The line was short, only a handful of people. He felt the familiar shift in the atmosphere as he took his place, a subtle tightening in the shoulders of the man in front of him, a sideways glance from a woman clutching a Louis Vuitton bag as if he might snatch it. It was a language spoken in silence, one he had learned to read with fluent, weary precision. He ignored it, focusing on his phone, reading a market analysis report. When it was his turn, he stepped forward and placed his passport and phone, displaying his e-ticket on the counter. The agent, a woman in her late 40s with a severe haircut and a name tag that read Diana, looked from his face to the ticket, then back to his face. A small frown line appeared between her eyebrows. First class to JFK. She asked, her tone flat, but with an undercurrent of skepticism, as if he had presented a lottery ticket and claimed it was the winner. "That's correct," Aiden said, keeping his own voice even and pleasant. Diana tapped at her keyboard with exaggerated force. She scanned his passport, then looked at the screen, then back at his ticket. The frown deepened. "There seems to be a discrepancy here, sir. I'm having trouble verifying this seat assignment." Aiden felt the first familiar flicker of cold frustration. He knew this dance. "I assure you the ticket was purchased 2 weeks ago. It's seat 2A. Perhaps you could try refreshing the system." The woman in the Vuitton bag behind him let out an audible, impatient sigh. "Some people," she muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Diana ignored Aiden's suggestion. Instead of rechecking, her gaze drifted over his attire. The expensive suit, the world-class watch on him, they didn't seem to register as markers of status. Instead, they seemed to fuel her suspicion, as if they were props in an elaborate deception. "I'm going to need you to step to the side, sir," she said, her voice acquiring a hard, authoritative edge. "I need to have my supervisor look at this." Aiden didn't move. "Step aside for what exactly?" "The ticket is valid. My passport is valid. I'd appreciate it if you'd just issue my boarding pass." His calm, direct refusal seemed to rattle her. It was a break in the expected script. He was supposed to be flustered, apologetic, or angry. He was none of those things. He was simply stating a fact. Diana's face flushed a blotchy red. "Sir, you are holding up the line. Either step aside or I will have to call airport security." The threat hung in the air, ugly and disproportionate. Behind him, the woman huffed again. The man in front, now checked in, lingered for a moment, watching the unfolding drama with undisguised curiosity. Aiden held Diana's gaze. The weariness was now a solid weight in his chest. He had just negotiated a multi-billion-dollar deal with some of the most powerful men in Europe, navigating complex financial models and cultural nuances with surgical precision. And here, in the bright, sterile light of an airport terminal, he was being reduced to a common stereotype, a black man who couldn't possibly afford to be in the front of the plane. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Fine," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a clear sign of his dwindling patience. "Call them." The supervisor, a harried-looking man named Jean-Pierre, arrived a few minutes later. He listened to Diana's whispered, urgent explanation, his eyes flicking over to Aidan, who now stood patiently to the side of the counter, as instructed. Aidan didn't cross his arms or tap his foot. He stood with a stillness that seemed to unnerve them more than any outburst would have. He simply observed. Jean-Pierre approached, holding Aidan's passport. He adopted a tone of forced, condescending politeness. "Monsieur, there appears to be a small issue with your ticket. It has been flagged in our system. It is likely just a technical error, but for security protocols we must be thorough." "Flagged for what?" Aidan asked, his tone betraying no emotion. "I am not at liberty to say," Jean-Pierre said evasively. "Perhaps if you have the credit card you used to purchase the ticket and a confirmation email." This was the next step in the dance. The proof of purchase gambit, as if the ticket itself wasn't proof. Aidan unlocked his phone, navigated to his email, and showed the confirmation from his corporate travel agency, a globally recognized firm. He then produced the matte black Centurion card, the famous Amex black card, from his wallet, the one used for the booking. Jean-Pierre's eyes widened almost imperceptibly at the sight of the card. It was a totem of wealth, so exclusive that it should have ended the conversation immediately. For a moment, it seemed like it would. He took the card, compared the name and number to his screen. Aidan could see the internal conflict playing out on the supervisor's face. The evidence was irrefutable, yet it clashed with the narrative Diana had planted. "One moment," Jean-Pierre mumbled, retreating to Diana's terminal. They huddled together, whispering. Aidan could feel the stares of other passengers. The scene was drawing an audience. He was no longer a person. He was a spectacle. The quiet humiliation was the point. It was a tax he was often forced to pay for his success. Finally, Jean-Pierre returned, handing back the passport and credit card with a stiff formality. "Very well. It seems to have been a system glitch. Diana will issue your boarding pass now." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the inconvenience or the implication. Diana printed the pass and slid it across the counter without making eye contact. Her lips pressed into a thin, resentful line. "Enjoy your flight, sir," she said, the words dripping with insincerity. Aidan took the pass. "Thank you," he replied, his voice level. He walked away the stairs of the other passengers, following him like a physical weight. An hour later, he was at gate B52. He sat in the designated first-class seating area, the tension from the check-in encounter having subsided into a low, simmering annoyance. He tried to focus on a book on his tablet, a history of the Ottoman Empire, but the words blurred. The incident had scraped away the protective layer of insulation his life usually afforded him. It was a stark reminder that no amount of success could make him invisible to prejudice. Boarding began with the pre-boarding call for families and those needing extra assistance. Then came the announcement he was waiting for. We would now like to invite our first and business class passengers to board at this time. Aidan stood up, joining the short queue. As he approached the podium, he saw the agent was, to his deep dismay, Diana. She was handling the boarding process alongside a younger male colleague. When she saw Aidan, her eyes narrowed. It was clear she hadn't forgotten their earlier encounter. He handed her his boarding pass and passport. She took them and made a show of scrutinizing them, under a desk lamp, her movements slow and deliberate. "Seat 2A, she said aloud, looking not at him but at her colleague. Funny that seat was showing as unassigned just an hour ago. Before Aidan could respond, a voice cut through the air from behind him. "I knew it. I just knew something was wrong." Aidan turned. It was the woman with the Louis Vuitton bag from the check-in line. She was impeccably dressed, dripping with jewelry, and her face was a mask of indignant certainty. "Let's call her Cynthia." "He was arguing with you at the check-in counter," Cynthia declared to Diana, as if they were co-conspirators in a grand investigation. "I saw the whole thing. There is no way that ticket is legitimate." The accusation, now spoken aloud, shifted the dynamic instantly. It was no longer a quiet, procedural suspicion. It was a public denouncement. A few other passengers in the line murmured in agreement, their own biases validated. Diana seemed emboldened by the support. She placed Aidan's boarding pass face down on the counter. "Sir, I'm sorry, but there are still unresolved flags on this booking. You won't be able to board at this time." "Unresolved." Aidan's voice was dangerously low. "Your supervisor cleared it. You issued the pass yourself. What precisely is the issue now?" "It's a security matter," Diana said, hiding behind the impenetrable wall of corporate policy. "That's all I can say." "This is ridiculous," Aidan stated, the frustration finally breaking through his composure. "I have a valid ticket for a flight that is about to depart. I demand to speak to the captain or the head of station for the airline." Cynthia scoffed. "Oh, listen to him making demands, as if he's in any position to do so." Diana seemed to make a decision. She picked up the phone at her station. "Gate B52. I need security down here immediately. We have a passenger causing a disturbance." A disturbance. The word was a weapon. It painted him as aggressive as a threat. He who had not raised his voice or made a single threatening gesture. He had merely insisted on his rights. 2 airport security officers arrived within a minute. They were large men, and their presence was immediately intimidating. The senior of the 2, with a name tag reading Officer Miller, approached with a weary authoritarian air. He didn't ask Aidan for his side of the story. He listened only to Diana. "He refuses to accept that his ticket is invalid," Diana explained, her voice trembling with what sounded like feigned fear. "He was belligerent at check-in, and now he's causing a scene, trying to force his way onto the plane." Officer Miller turned to Aidan, his expression hard and unforgiving. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me." "I am not going anywhere," Aidan said, his voice now steely. "I am a ticketed first-class passenger on this flight." Miller's eyes were cold. "Right now, you are a security risk. You can either walk with me, or I can escort you in handcuffs. Your choice." The threat of physical restraint, of public arrest, was the final brutal escalation. The entire gate area was now silent, watching. Aidan looked at the faces in the crowd. He saw fear, judgment, and in a few, a flicker of shame. But no one spoke up for him. To them, the scene made a kind of perverse sense. Authority figures, a security guard and an airline agent, dealing with a black man who was clearly out of place. He looked past Miller's shoulder down the jet bridge. He could see the interior of the Boeing 777, the plush, cream-colored pods of the first-class cabin. Seat 2A, his seat, was waiting for him. A place he had paid for, a place he was entitled to. But a wall of uniformed prejudice stood between him and it. He took a slow breath, centering himself. The anger was a roaring fire in his chest, but he knew that letting it out would only prove them right. It would be the disturbance they were so desperate to create. He had one card left to play. It wasn't the card he wanted to play, but they had forced his hand. He slowly reached into his pocket, not for ID, but for his phone. Officer Miller tensed his hand, instinctively moving towards his side. "Easy." Aidan said, his eyes locking with the officer's. He held the phone up. I just need to make a call. The air in the gate area was thick with a tense, expectant silence. Every eye was on Aidan as he held his phone. Officer Miller watched him with predatory stillness, his posture radiating aggressive impatience. Diana stood behind her podium, arms crossed, the picture of vindicated authority. Cynthia, the self-appointed jury, looked on with a smug smirk. Aidan ignored them all. He navigated to his contacts and pressed a name, Chloe. His executive assistant, Chloe, was a force of nature, disguised as a calm, hyper-efficient professional in her late 20s. She picked up on the first ring, her voice crisp and alert, even though it was the middle of the afternoon in New York. Aidan, everything all right? I thought you'd be in the air by now. Aidan kept his voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere around him. Change of plans, Chloe. I won't be taking transatlantic air flight 88. Officer Miller shifted his weight. Sir, this is not the time for phone calls. Aidan held up a single finger, a gesture of command that was so natural and authoritative it momentarily stopped Miller in his tracks. He kept his eyes on a distant point down the terminal, focusing. Chloe, listen carefully. I need you to do 2 things for me right now. First, cancel my seat on TA-88. Full cancellation effective immediately. Get the confirmation and demand a full refund, citing denial of service at the gate. A beat of silence on the other end. Then Chloe's voice sharp with concern. Denied service. What happened? Are you okay? I'm fine. Just handle it. Second, and more importantly, I need you to call Leo. He's flying the G700 tail number, N700AT. They should be over the Atlantic by now, maybe an hour or 2 out from Geneva. I need him to turn around. This time the silence on Chloe's end was longer. The request was extraordinary. Turning a private jet around mid-flight over the ocean was a major logistical and financial decision, costing tens of thousands of dollars in fuel and fees. Turn around, Chloe repeated, disbelief coloring her tone. That's right. Have him reverse course and return to Geneva Cointrin Airport. File a new flight plan. Geneva to Teterboro. Passenger Aidan Michael. Tell him to use the call sign Ether1. He'll know what that means. It's priority. I want wheels up as soon as they can get refueled and cleared. Can you do that? Of course, Aidan. Consider it done. I'll have the FBO director meet you personally. Are you sure you're all right? I'll be better once I'm home, Chloe. Thank you. He ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket. The entire exchange had taken less than 90 seconds. He then looked directly at Diana, whose face was a canvas of confusion. My ticket on your flight has just been cancelled, Aidan announced to the silent audience. Seat 2A is now available. You can sell it to someone else. I trust this resolves the security issue. Diana was speechless. This was not in her script. He was supposed to argue, to plead to be escorted away in shame. He wasn't supposed to simply withdraw, and in doing so, snatch her victory away. Officer Miller stepped forward, his frustration palpable. You still caused a disturbance. You still need to come with me. We need to file a report. Aidan finally turned his full attention to the security officer. The calm facade dropped for a fraction of a second, revealing the cold, hard steel beneath. You have no authority to detain me, he said, his voice resonating with an intensity that made Miller flinch. I am not a passenger on this airline. I am not attempting to breach security. I am a private citizen standing in a public area of the airport. If you touch me, I will press charges for unlawful detainment and assault. I will bring the full legal and financial weight of my corporation down on you, this airport and this airline. Test me. He spoke with the absolute certainty of a man who had done it before and would not hesitate to do it again. He mentioned no numbers, no company names, but the conviction in his voice was more powerful than any business card. Miller stared at him, the gears turning in his head. The legalistic language, the unshakable confidence, the sheer audacity of it all, it was starting to poke holes in his preconceived notions. This man didn't sound like a typical troublemaker. He sounded like a lawyer, or worse. Jean-Pierre, the supervisor who had been lurking in the background, hurried forward. He saw a public relations nightmare unfolding. Officer, that won't be necessary," he said, trying to de-escalate. He turned to Aidan. "Sir, our apologies for the misunderstanding. You are, of course, free to go." Aidan gave a single sharp nod. He turned his back on them all, on Miller's impotent rage, on Diana's stunned disbelief, on Cynthia's slack-jawed confusion. He did not look back. He simply walked away from Gate B-52, leaving a void of stunned silence in his wake. As he walked, he could hear the boarding call for Flight 88 resume a little shakier than before. He could imagine the passenger shuffling forward, glancing at the empty space where he had stood, whispering amongst themselves. They had witnessed a confrontation, but they had no idea what they had truly seen. They thought they saw a man being put in his place. They had no way of knowing they had just watched a king, tired of being mistaken for a pawn, decide to flip the entire chessboard over. He walked through the bustling terminal, a man moving against the current. The noise and the crowds that were meant to be his connection to the texture of life now felt suffocating. The experiment had failed. His father was wrong, or perhaps the world had changed too much. The pulse of the crowd was not one of shared humanity. It was a thrum of suspicion and judgment. He exited the main terminal, stepping out into the cool Swiss evening. He took a deep breath, the air clean and sharp. The black S-Class was already waiting for him at the curb, the driver holding the door open. Chloe was ruthlessly efficient. "The private terminal, sir?" the driver asked. "Yes, please," Aidan said, sliding into the supple leather seat. As the car pulled away from the curb, he looked back at the massive glass facade of the commercial terminal. It was a brightly lit terrarium of human drama, and he was profoundly glad to be leaving it behind. He had been so determined to prove he could still belong in that world, only to be violently reminded that in the eyes of many, he never would. Fine. He would fly in his world, the one he had built for himself, brick by brick, algorithm by algorithm, the one where respect wasn't a privilege they could grant or withhold. It was the price of entry. The private terminal at Geneva was a sanctuary of quiet efficiency. As the Mercedes pulled up to the FBO, the director himself, a crisply dressed Swiss man named Mr. Dubois, was waiting at the door. Chloe's call had clearly conveyed the necessary urgency and importance. "Mr. Michael, welcome back. We were surprised but are fully prepared for your departure," Dubois said, with a polite professional bow of his head. "Your crew has been alerted. They are refueling the aircraft as we speak. We will have you in the air in under 45 minutes. There was no check-in counter, no security line. Aidan's passport was stamped by a dedicated customs agent in a private lounge in less than a minute. As he sat in an Eames chair, sipping a sparkling water, brought to him on a silver tray, he could see his jet N700AT on the tarmac through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The massive fuel truck was just pulling away. The Gulfstream G700 was a marvel of aeronautical engineering, its lines sleek and predatory, its twin Rolls-Royce engines promising incredible power and range. It looked less like a plane and more like a tethered raptor, eager to be unleashed into the sky. Leo met him at the lounge door. The pilot's usually unflappable demeanor was tinged with concern. "Aidan, what the hell happened over there?" Aidan gave him a wry, tired smile. "Let's just say my experiment in humility has been indefinitely postponed. A disturbance at the gate." Leo's eyes hardened. He had flown with Aidan for 5 years and had seen subtler versions of this prejudice play out in different countries on different tarmacs. The usual garbage, Leo stated not as a question, but as a fact. The usual garbage, Aidan confirmed. But louder this time, let's get out of here. They walked out onto the tarmac. The evening was cool, and the smell of jet fuel was sharp in the air. As they approached the G700, the air stairs unfolded with a soft, hydraulic hiss. His co-pilot and a flight attendant were waiting at the top. They greeted him with respectful familiarity, their expressions professional but welcoming. This was his crew, his team. Here he was not a suspicion. He was the mission. Stepping inside the cabin felt like coming home. The custom interior was designed to his exact specifications, a symphony of muted greys, brushed aluminum, and dark walnut. It was a flying office and a sanctuary, a space where he had absolute control. He sank into one of the wide leather captain's chairs, and the flight attendant, a warm professional named Maria, took his coat. "Welcome back, Mr. Michael," Maria said with a smile. "Can I get you something before we take off? The Krug is still chilled." Aidan considered it for a moment. Then he shook his head. "No champagne, just get me a double espresso. And Maria," he added, "strap yourself in tight. I've asked Leo to get us home as fast as this bird will fly." "Understood, sir," she replied, heading for the galley. Within minutes, the cabin door was sealed, the engine spooled up with a deep, powerful hum, and the jet began to taxi. From his window, Aidan could see the commercial side of the airport, a constellation of lights and activity. He saw a Boeing 747 with the transatlantic air livery being pushed back from its gate, Flight 88, his former flight. He watched it for a moment, a lumbering giant, and felt a strange sense of detachment, as if watching a scene from a movie he was no longer in. The G700 didn't wait in a queue for takeoff. As Ether 1, they were given priority clearance. They bypassed a line of commercial airliners and moved directly onto the runway. "Ether 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Runway 22. Wind is 230 at 5 knots. Fly runway, heading climb and maintain, flight level 430. The tower's voice crackled through the cabin. "Cleared for takeoff runway, heading to 430 Ether 1. Leo's voice replied, calm and confident. The engines roared to life, a sound not of brute force, but of immense, refined power. The acceleration was breathtaking, pushing Aidan back into his seat. The G700 rocketed down the runway and lifted into the night sky with an impossibly steep angle of ascent. Commercial planes had to climb in stages. The G700 could, in the right conditions, climb directly to its cruising altitude of over 40,000 feet in less than 20 minutes. As they climbed, the lights of Geneva and the surrounding towns shrank into a glittering carpet below, then vanished beneath a layer of clouds. Aidan watched the altimeter on his display screen spin upwards with dizzying speed. 10,000 feet, 20,000, 30,000. They punched through the cloud layer into a realm of serene clarity. The sky above was a deep star-dusted indigo, and the moon was a silver crescent. Maria brought him his espresso in a simple porcelain cup. He sipped it, the bitterness sharp and welcome. The anger and humiliation from the gate were beginning to dissipate, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. He connected to the jet's high-speed satellite Wi-Fi and opened his laptop. Work was a comfort, a world of logic and data, where the variables were known and the outcomes were predictable. He began to draft a memo to his legal team. It was concise and brutal. He detailed the events at the check-in and the gate naming Diana and Officer Miller specifically. He instructed his team to file official complaints with Transatlantic Air, the Geneva Airport Authority, and the Swiss Federal Police. He didn't want compensation. He wanted accountability. He wanted a formal investigation and a record of the incident, a black mark on the files of those who had judged him. As he typed, he thought again of his father. What would he say about this? Would he see it as a retreat? A surrender to the gilded cage, perhaps? But Aidan saw it differently. His father's generation had fought for a seat at the table. Aidan's generation, having earned that seat, had to fight for the right to sit in it without being challenged. And sometimes the most powerful statement wasn't to demand your seat, but to show them you owned the whole damn building. The Gulf Stream wasn't just a convenience. It was a tool. It was a declaration of independence from the systems and prejudices that sought to define him. An hour into the flight, as they streaked across the coast of France, at nearly the speed of sound, a message popped up on his screen from Chloe. Flight TA-88 departed Geneva, 48 minutes late due to a gate issue. Their flight path will take them over the North Atlantic just south of your current position. ETA JFK is approximately 7:30 a.m. Eastern. Aidan looked at the message, then at the flight tracker on his own screen. Two tiny icons moving across a vast digital ocean. One a lumbering giant carrying hundreds of souls, including Diana and Cynthia, who were likely sipping champagne in their first-class seats, congratulating themselves on their vigilance. The other, a sleek silver dart carrying one man who they had dismissed and tried to discard. For a moment, he felt a flash of vindictive satisfaction. They were trapped in a metal tube for the next 8 hours, subject to the whims of the airline and the weather. He was free, moving faster and higher in total control of his environment. But the feeling didn't last. It was replaced by that old, familiar weariness. It was a hollow victory. He hadn't wanted this confrontation. He hadn't wanted to pull rank or flex his financial muscle. He had just wanted to go home. He had just wanted to sit in Seat 2A, read his book, and feel the simple, anonymous pulse of the world. He closed his laptop, the legal memo sent. He leaned his head back against the soft leather and closed his eyes. The only sound was the faint whisper of the air rushing past the fuselage, the sound of leaving the world behind. 4 hours into the flight, somewhere over the dark, churning expanse of the North Atlantic, the incident at Geneva had become a distant, unpleasant memory for the passengers and crew of Transatlantic Air Flight 88. In the first-class cabin, the dinner service was concluding. Cynthia was on her 3rd glass of Chardonnay, recounting her version of the gateside drama to a fellow passenger, painting herself as a vigilant citizen who had helped avert an unspecified but clearly dire security threat. In the galley at the front of the plane, Diana was chatting with the lead flight attendant, Sarah. Diana felt a smug sense of accomplishment. She had faced down a difficult man, enforced the rules, and kept her flight secure. Her supervisor had even given her a quiet nod of approval after the plane finally pushed back. She was sure a commendation would be in her file by morning. In the cockpit of the Boeing 777, Captain David James and his first officer Mike were running through their routine checks. James was a veteran pilot with over 20,000 hours of flight time. He was calm, meticulous, and had a deep, abiding respect for the magnificent machine he commanded. The flight had been perfectly smooth so far. Oil pressure and temps are green across the board, Mike said, his eyes scanning the array of digital displays on the EKS engine, indicating and crew alerting system. Good. Let's get an updated weather report for the approach into JFK, James instructed. As Mike reached for the comms panel, a small amber light began to flash on the main console. It was a caution alert. Both pilots immediately stiffened their relaxed posture, vanishing. "What have we got?" James asked, his voice sharp. Mike's eyes darted to the ICA's screen. A message had appeared. L-Gen oft. Left generator overheat. Intermittent. James's eyes narrowed. An overheating generator wasn't a critical emergency, but it was a serious issue. The generators, powered by the massive engines, supplied all the electricity for the aircraft, from the flight controls to the coffee makers. The 777 had backups for its backups, but any failure in the primary system thousands of miles from the nearest land was cause for major concern. "Okay, let's run the checklist," James said, his voice a mask of professional calm. "Pull up the non-normal for generator overheat." They methodically worked through the procedures. They tried to reset the generator. The amber light went out, then came back on, flashing more insistently this time. Then another light joined it. L-bus tie, IS Ellen. "Okay, the bus tie just isolated," Mike said, a new edge of tension in his voice. The plane's electrical system was automatically isolating the faulty generator to prevent a wider failure. They were now running a significant portion of the aircraft's systems on the right engine's generator alone. "Damn it," James muttered. He keyed his microphone. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Shanwick Oceanic. This is Transatlantic Air 88. We have an electrical system malfunction, a persistent left generator failure. We are declaring an emergency and requesting immediate diversion to the nearest suitable airport." The calm, disembodied voice of the air traffic controller at the Shanwick Oceanic Control Center in Ireland came back instantly. "Transatlantic 88, Roger, Mayday. Nearest suitable is Shannon, Ireland. SNN. Can you accept a direct routing to Shannon Airport, a historic airfield on the west coast of Ireland, a crucial waypoint for transatlantic flights for decades. It had long runways and excellent emergency services. It was their best and only option." "Affirmative," James confirmed, requesting descent and direct routing to Shannon. The controller gave them their new heading and a lower altitude. As James banked the heavy jet to the northeast, turning back toward Europe, he made the dreaded announcement to the cabin. "Folks, this is your captain speaking from the flight deck. We appear to be having a minor issue with one of our electrical generators. Everything is under control, but out of an abundance of caution, we will be diverting our flight to Shannon, Ireland, where we will land in approximately 90 minutes. The cabin crew will be coming through to prepare for our arrival. We apologize for this disruption to your travel plans." The effect in the cabin was immediate. A wave of groans and anxious murmurs swept through the passengers. In first class, Cynthia's face soured. Ireland. She had a spa appointment in the Hamptons tomorrow morning. This was simply unacceptable. Diana, coming out of the galley, felt a pit in her stomach. A diversion was a logistical nightmare of angry passengers, rebookings, and endless paperwork. Her triumphant evening was quickly turning into a professional disaster. Meanwhile, 500 miles to the west and 10,000 feet higher, Aidan Michael was sleeping. The cabin of the G700 was quiet and dark. The chair reclined into a fully flat bed. He was in a deep, dreamless sleep, the stresses of the day finally released. He was awoken by the soft chime of the intercom. "Aidan, it's Leo. Sorry to wake you." Aidan sat up, instantly alert. "What's going on?" "Something interesting. We've been monitoring the chatter on the emergency frequency. An airliner just declared Mayday about 400 nautical miles east of us. A Boeing 797. It's Transatlantic Air Flight 88. Aidan sat in silence for a moment, processing the information. Flight 88. Diana's flight. Cynthia's flight. "What's the issue?" he asked. "Sounds like a serious electrical problem. Generator failure. They're diverting to Shannon Island. Looks like they'll get there safely, but they're going to be on the ground for a while." Aidan looked out his window into the blackness. A cosmic irony was unfolding at 45,000 feet. The flight he had been cast out of was now in distress, limping back to land, while he soared effortlessly toward home. "Keep me posted," Aidan said. He leaned back, but sleep was now impossible. His mind was racing. Shannon, Ireland. He pulled up a flight map on his screen. He plotted the course of TAE-8 and his own G700. Their paths, which had been diverging, would now cross. Shannon was a common refueling stop for private jets, making the Atlantic crossing, especially against strong winter headwinds. It was entirely plausible for the G700 to need a tech stop there. A plan began to form in his mind. It was audacious, complex, and utterly unnecessary. But the story felt incomplete. The universe had presented him with a bizarre third act, and his finely honed instinct for seizing opportunities, the same instinct that had built his empire, was screaming at him. He pressed the intercom button again. "Leo." "Go ahead, Aidan. How's our fuel situation?" "We've got plenty. Strong tailwind. We can make Teterboro with reserves to spare." "I want to change our destination," Aidan said, his voice calm and decisive. "File a new flight plan. I want to land in Shannon." There was a moment of surprised silence from the cockpit. "Shannon?" Leo asked. "Aidan, we don't need to stop. Is there a problem?" "No problem at all," Aidan replied, a slow smile spreading across his face in the darkened cabin. "I just have a feeling we need to be there. Let's call it a texture stop." Shannon Airport, on a damp, windy night, was a world away from the polished bustle of Geneva. For the passengers of Transatlantic Air Flight 88, it was a dreary, unwelcome sight, as their Boeing 777, guided by the skill of Captain James, landed safely under emergency conditions. The relief of being on the ground quickly soured, as the reality of their situation became clear. They were taxied to a remote stand, and the captain's weary voice announced the news: a critical generator part had failed, a replacement was not available locally, and they were facing a significant delay. They were stranded. The terminal devolved into a scene of weary resignation, a logistical nightmare of scarce hotel rooms and flaring tempers. Diana, her professional authority now useless, was bombarded with complaints from angry passengers. Among the loudest was Cynthia, whose indignation echoed through the small terminal. "This is an outrage," she declared to anyone who would listen. "I will not be stuck in this backwater." For Diana, it was a bitter taste of the same entitled frustration she had silently championed just hours before. 30 minutes later, another aircraft sliced through the Irish mist. The Gulfstream G700 touched down with quiet precision, taxiing not to a remote stand, but directly to the exclusive private terminal. As Aidan Michael stepped into the serene FBO lounge, he was greeted by the station manager. His executive assistant, Chloe, had already briefed them. "Mr. Michael, welcome to Shannon," the manager said. "We can arrange transport to a hotel for you and your crew." "Thank you, but our plans have changed," Aidan said smoothly, his eyes scanning the airfield. "I understand there's a stranded transatlantic air flight here. A 707 with a generator issue." The manager nodded. "Yes, a nightmare for them. They're trying to fly in a replacement part from London, but fog has everything delayed. They'll be here for at least 24 hours. Aidan's focus sharpened. This was the level of detail he thrived on, not just the problem, but the precise logistical bottleneck. "What part do they need?" "An IDG, an integrated drive generator," the manager replied. Aidan knew the component intimately. His mind, trained to see patterns in global supply chains, instantly grasped the complexity. Getting a part that large and specialized moved on short notice through layers of weather delays and airline bureaucracy was nearly impossible. His phone pinged with a message from Chloe confirming his suspicion. Transatlantic had the part at their Heathrow hub, but no way to get it to Shannon in a timely manner. The original fleeting thought of a simple, quiet vindication of letting Diana and Cynthia see him board his own jet now felt petty and insufficient. The universe had presented him with a far grander chessboard. He looked at the distant, darkened shape of the 711, a grounded giant holding hundreds of lives in limbo. Power wasn't just the ability to rise above a problem, it was the ability to solve it. He turned back to the manager, his decision made. My company has a logistics account with the maintenance hub at Heathrow. I'm going to make a call. I need you to arrange for a part to be delivered here to my aircraft from the transatlantic air hub. The manager stared, dumbfounded. Sir, you want to fly your private jet to London to pick up a part for a commercial airliner. That's exactly what I want to do, Aidan confirmed. And I want it done quietly. This was a move beyond spite or ego. It was a demonstration of a different kind of strength, the kind his father had spoken of. True strength was not in retribution, but in magnanimity. He wouldn't be their vengeful ghost. He would be their unseen savior, a ghost in the machine of their salvation. He was about to provide a solution for the 300 stranded passengers, and in doing so, deliver a lesson in character to the few who had judged him. Leo. Aidan called out to his pilot, who was already beginning to work on a new flight plan. How quickly can we get to London? Leo didn't miss a beat. Wheels up in 20 minutes, he replied. We can be there and back before the sun comes up. Good. Aidan said, his gaze fixed on the distant, powerless airliner. Let's go give them a lift. The flight to London was a masterclass in precision. While the commercial airline world was mired in delays and bureaucracy, Aidan Michael's team operated like a scalpel. They cut through red tape, arranged for the crated integrated drive generator to be waiting tarmac side at Heathrow, and cleared all permits before the Gulfstream G700 even landed. The jet was on the ground for less than an hour, a ghost appearing in the London fog, collecting the multi-million-dollar heart of a jumbo jet and vanishing back into the night. As they flew back to Shannon, the first light of dawn was breaking, promising an end to the long, dark ordeal. Back in the Shannon terminal, that dawn felt distant. The initial chaos had settled into a sullen, exhausted quiet. Captain David James was in the airport's operations room, receiving the final dismal news from the local maintenance chief. The official charter flight with the part was still grounded in London. Best case, the chief said, you're looking at getting out of here tomorrow. As James absorbed the blow, picturing another 24 hours of passenger misery, his phone buzzed. It was the transatlantic station manager from Heathrow, his voice strained with disbelief. David, you're not going to believe this. Your IDG is on its way. It left here an hour ago. James straightened up. What? How the charter is fogged in. It's not a charter, the manager explained. It's on a private jet, a Gulfstream, call sign Ether 1. It flew here from Shannon, picked up the part, and is landing back there in 20 minutes. The owner is covering the entire cost. Stunned into silence, James walked to the window, overlooking the airfield just as the sun finally broke through the clouds. As if on cue, a sleek silver jet banked gracefully for its final approach. It touched down with a whisper and taxied directly to the maintenance hangar, where his crippled 777 was waiting. He watched, mesmerized, as the cargo door opened and engineers began carefully unloading the crate. The ghost was real. News of the Miracle Part's arrival swept through the airline staff, bringing a wave of relief and utter confusion. In the terminal, a ragged cheer went up from the passengers when an announcement promised a departure in just a few hours. Having pieced together the night's impossible puzzle, the 48-minute delay in Geneva, the name on the manifest, the call sign Ether 1, and the name of its owner, Captain James, walked with cold purpose into the terminal. He found Diana at the gate podium, looking exhausted, but relieved. "Diana," he began, his voice low and devoid of warmth. "I want to talk about the passenger you denied boarding to in Geneva." She stiffened. "Sir, his ticket was flagged. He was a security risk." "No." James cut her off, his eyes like ice. "His name is Aidan Michael. His ticket was perfect. You and your security guard profiled him because he was a black man in first class. You caused our initial delay. You humiliated this airline's top-tier clients." He leaned in, his voice dropping further. "And now I want to tell you who just saved us. The private jet that flew into the fog to get the part that will allow 300 people to go home. That was a Gulfstream G700 call sign, Ether 1. It's owned by a tech firm called Ether Logics. The founder and CEO is Aidan Michael." The color drained from Diana's face. The world seemed to tilt. She remembered his unshakable calm, his quiet confidence, the phone call she had dismissed. She had mistaken his dignity for arrogance, his power for a threat. At that moment, Cynthia bustled up to the podium. "Well, it's about time. Did you find out which of us heroes in first class arranged for that part?" Neither Diana nor Captain James answered. They just stared out the window where the silver jet was being refueled, preparing for its own journey home. Aidan Michael never saw their faces. His work was done. As Ether 1 finally departed, Shannon climbing steeply into the bright morning sky, it flew directly over the transatlantic air 777. For a moment, the G700's shadow passed over the wing of the larger plane, a fleeting, silent eclipse. Looking down, Aidan felt no smug satisfaction, just a profound, quiet peace. He had faced their prejudice, not with rage, but with a grace so complete they could never fully comprehend its scale. He hadn't just proven he belonged, he had operated in a stratosphere of character they couldn't even imagine. The story of Aidan Michael isn't just about the difference between a first-class ticket and a private jet. It's about the gulf between prejudice and character. He was judged by the color of his skin, but his response was a masterclass in quiet strength and profound grace. Instead of seeking revenge, he chose to solve a problem for the very people who had wronged him, not for their benefit, but for the benefit of everyone else caught in the middle. He proved that true status isn't about where you sit on an airplane. It's about how you rise above the turbulence of intolerance. If this story of quiet strength and ultimate vindication moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. And let me know in the comments below, what would you have done in Aidan's position? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching.